Well, hi, everybody. I'm Stewart, and welcome to another edition of Breaking News for this Friday, the 31st day of May, the last day of the month. And as we told you earlier today on our first edition of Breaking News, that the United States has become a banana republic with the verdict that we saw given yesterday, about 24 hours ago in Manhattan. Basically, this jury said Donald Trump was guilty of 34 felonies, 34 counts, and the entire leftist news media is saying he's a convicted felon. He's a convicted felon. You know, they're all reading from the same playbook here. And we said because of this, because there was really no real criminal act whatsoever, the trial was not fair in any way, shape, or form. It will be overturned on appeal eventually. The trouble is, if it goes through the state appeal system, that won't happen until after the election's over. Now, there's another way of doing it through the federal courts. Mark Levin, the great one, he had talked about that, and hopefully Trump's lawyers will go that direction and get it to the Supreme Court right away. And that case that will be overturned, and they won't be able to say he's a convicted felon. All right. Now, we talked about, again, the sadness of the United States being a banana republic. They're not in last days Bible prophecy. We emphasize that, sign 11 of our 25 signs. You know, something's going to happen to the U.S., and something has happened. We're shooting ourselves in the foot. We're not acting with, lawlessness, and basically lawlessness and violence are taking over here. It's not the United States we used to know. All right. Having said that, as a background, Joe Biden made some remarks today about Israel's war with the Hamas. It's one of the strangest things that he's ever done. But what it is proof. It puts another exclamation point of what we've been saying earlier, that the U.S. is not a player in Bible prophecy. We've lost all standing in the world. Our enemies don't fear us. Our friends don't trust us. And the rest of the world thinks we're irrelevant. Okay, listen to this. All right, he gets up and he says, a hostage deal proposal. Israel's hostage deal proposal is a historic opportunity. Hamas should take it. He addressed the people of Israel directly. The people of Israel should know that they can take this hostage deal offer without any further risk to their own security because they've devastated Hamas's forces over the past 8 months. At this point, Hamas is no longer capable of carrying out another October 7th. This is one of Israel's main objectives in the war, and quite frankly, a righteous one. I know that there are those in Israel who will not agree with this plan, will call for the war to continue indefinitely. Some are even in the governing coalition. They made it clear that they want to occupy Gaza. They want to keep fighting for years, and the hostages are not a priority to them. Well, I've urged the leadership in Israel to stand behind this deal, despite whatever pressure comes. To the people of Israel, let me say this. As someone who has had a lifelong commitment to Israel, as the only American president who has ever gone to Israel in a time of war, as someone who just sent U.S. forces to directly defend Israel when it was attacked by Iran, I ask you to take a step back and think what will happen if this moment is lost. You can't lose this moment. Indefinite war in pursuit of an unidentified notion of total victory will only bog down Israel and Gaza, draining military, economic, and human resources, and further Israel's isolation in the world. That will not bring hostages home. That will not bring an enduring defeat of Hamas. That will not bring Israel lasting security. Now, he did acknowledge, Biden in his talk, that there will be differences between the sides in these ensuing negotiations. But if Hamas comes to negotiate ready to deal, then Israel's negotiators must be given a mandate with necessary flexibility to close the deal, he said. The ceasefire agreement would see the release of all remaining hostages, including soldiers and the bodies of the captives that are killed. He said there's a ready to be implemented agreement during this speech. And according to Biden, the Israel proposed ceasefire would be implemented in 3 stages. Now, here's the key. He calls it the Israel proposed ceasefire. This is not something we've seen at all from the leadership of Israel, but this is a proposal that we saw. Remember, it was a few weeks ago. What's his name? Burns, the CIA director, was trying to palm it off to the Egyptians and in Qatar that this is Israel will eventually go for this deal. Netanyahu says no. His coalition says no. But Biden is palming this off as something that is coming from Israel. So anyway, here's how it's supposed to go. The first phase would entail a complete ceasefire and withdrawal of IDF soldiers from Gaza, the partial release of some of the remaining hostages, a swap for Palestinian prisoners, and the entry of 600 trucks into the strip. This phase would last 6 weeks. The second phase would be a permanent end to hostilities. In other words, 6 weeks of ceasefire, then a permanent end. If it were to take longer than 6 weeks to reach phase two, the 6 week ceasefire would extend. In other words, no more fighting. Additionally, this would include the release of the remaining live hostages, including soldiers. This would also mean the formal permanent cessation of hostilities. In other words, the war would be over. The third phase would include the reparation of the Gaza Strip achieved. This phase would only include the return of the remains of the hostages who died in captivity. It would also include the remains of the hostages who died in captivity. Biden called this proposal a historic opportunity and urged Hamas to accept it. New Labor Party head MK Yair Golan applauded this statement. Yair Golan, I was going to mention him. He was just voted to lead the Labor Party, the new Labor Party head. You know, the first thing he said what Israel should do? He told the reservists, those who are fighting, to reject any call up to duty. Do not fight. Do not fight any longer. Go into the streets and start protesting. And let's have an insurrection, overthrow the government so we can have a new government, one that knows what they're doing. And by you committing this type of insurrection and not following the law, that's the way to get it done. I mean, people just went absolutely nuts when he said that. Talk about treason, this and that. And so he thinks this is a great idea. All right. Now that was from Jerusalem Post. They made the point, and the way they put it is that this was Israel's proposal that Biden was sharing. All right, now it looks like a Breitbart News. Biden proposes ceasefire, hostage deal that Hamas has already rejected. That's what he's proposing, and he says the total victory is impossible. Okay, here's from Joel from Breitbart. President Joe Biden announced a proposal for a ceasefire and hostage deal between Israel and Hamas on Friday, but its terms repeat those that Hamas had already rejected in recent weeks. Now, here's the key. Biden spoke at the onset of the Jewish Shabbat or Sabbath in Israel, meaning that the Israeli government would not be able to respond to his comments, at least officially, for about 24 hours. So he said it right when the Sabbath was beginning. So for the next 24 hours, this is what's going to be in the headlines, what's going to be in the news, because on the Sabbath, everything shuts down. Nobody, no media, no nothing in Israel. And he did this purposely. So let's not forget this. He claimed that Israel had offered the new deal and that had been transferred via Qatar mediators to Hamas. However, he later criticized members of the Israeli government who, he said, opposed the terms. Well, who's for it then? The Times of Israel said it was unclear whether the Israeli government had actually accepted the terms. Biden acknowledged that the proposal would not require Hamas to be completely defeated, but he argued at this point Hamas is no longer capable of carrying out another October 7th. Biden acknowledged that the proposal would not require Hamas to be, we just said, completely defeated. At this point, they're no longer capable of carrying out another October 7th. All right. He blasted skeptics of the plan within the Israeli government itself, claiming without evidence that the hostages are not a priority to them. Who thinks that? Biden also said that Israeli pursuit of the goal of total victory would be futile and would only bog down Israel and Gaza. He offered the prospect of a normalization deal with Saudi Arabia after the war had ended. He began his remarks, now this is interesting, by lauding the conviction of former President Donald Trump in New York, saying that it showed no one is above the law. He said it was reckless for anyone to suggest the trial had been rigged. No one is above the law. Now, that's really something special coming from him, isn't it? Anyway, we'll leave that one for now. It is unclear why Biden felt the need to deliver a speech announcing a set of proposals that had already been made, except possibly as a pretext to respond to the Trump verdict without organizing a press event specifically to do so. It's also possible that Hamas feels new pressure as a result of Israeli military Operation Rafah and may be more willing to negotiate because now they control the Gaza border, cutting Hamas off from the smuggling routes. All right, the bottom line is this. He made this proposal, and initially, as I was reading, because I read it from the Israeli source, the Jerusalem Post, that this is an Israeli proposal. And as I'm reading it, saying this is an Israeli proposal, they've never agreed to this. Netanyahu says nothing less than total victory. They've lost all these soldiers fighting in the war to quit right now, especially when they've got a foothold where they're keeping the supplies coming, or starting to anyway, keeping the supplies from coming to Egypt, to Hamas. And so it just seemed like, something that was odd hearing that. Now, what's really interesting, and you might want to take advantage of this, if you go to the website, the Jerusalem Post, and read this story and read the comments, At last count, there were about 560 of them from Israelis and other people commenting on Biden's talk. And let me tell you, every single one of them was negative. They said, "Who made this agreement? Who would Israel make this? This is nothing we agree to. What the Hamas is now taken out of the picture. They can't do another October 7th." And they said, "Are you kidding me? And whose mind is he saying this?" Anyway, totally against it. And again, what really got me, the first thing I thought of, he gives us right, as pointed out by Joel there from Breitbart. He does it right when the Sabbath is starting, so no one can respond to him. So it's going to sit in the news cycle for 24 hours. Anyway, we'll see what Israel says when we're with you tomorrow, first thing. Well, let's see, the Shabbat will be over probably mid-morning here in California. Something will probably leak. We'll be talking about it tomorrow in great detail. All right. Israel gave Biden his worst news yet. This is from Business Insider. This kind of maybe one of the keys why he did this. The war in Gaza could last past the election. Um, Israel expects its war against Hamas to last for months, maybe more, past the U.S. election. This could keep the war in Gaza at the top of the voters' minds. Biden's support for Israel is causing him to lose traction among young voters, polls show. And so this is, a business publication, but it makes the point. His worst news is what Hanabi said yesterday. It's going to last at least another 7 months to get the job done. The war, we're not quite done yet. And so Biden cannot stand this. So basically, what he was doing, bottom line, is he was telling the Israeli people what he said they must do. This is a historic opportunity, basically trying to make Israel the banana. I think the U.S. is a banana republic, but having at least control over this other sovereign country, Israel. It is beyond pathetic. Anyway, now we got one more story I want to deal with. World War III watch. Germany approves Ukraine's use of its missiles against Russia. Remember, Biden said he's given the okay to use U.S. weapons from Ukraine to go over into Russia to cross the border there to destroy elements, armaments there in Russia. And people have said, "No, what are you doing this for? This is ridiculous." Well, now you got Germany approving the same thing of Ukraine's use of missiles against Russia. Ukraine can use weapons supplied by Germany against attacks from positions just over the Russian border, Berlin announced Friday. NATO members France and Poland have already given the same understanding to Kiev, as Breitbart News reported. Their move prompted immediate warnings from the Kremlin of a full-scale war with the West. In fact, the headline's called World War III Watch here, as NATO has given a broader approval for the use of Western-supplied missiles in the conflict. Joe Biden said on Thursday that Kiev gave Kiev a green light to strike back with American weapons at Russian military assets targeting the country's second largest city. The German government said in a statement that together with its closest allies and in consultation with Ukraine, it's continually adapting its support to developments in the war. It noted that in recent weeks, Russia had prepared, coordinated, and carried out attacks against the Kharkiv region, in particular those areas just over the border with Russia. Together, we are convinced that Ukraine has the right under international law to defend itself against those attacks. So for this, it can use the weapons delivered for that purpose in accordance with its international legal commitments, including the ones delivered from us. That's Germany. Meanwhile, Russia ballistic missiles slammed to an apartment block in Kharkiv, killed at least 4 people in a nighttime attack, Iranian officials said Friday. All right, so we got that going on. This could really, gin up to something much more larger than just these two countries fighting, Ukraine and Russia. We don't know. And Biden again is calling the shots for supposedly it's for the United States and putting us in harm's way there. And every time these stories come up, like Joel Pollack, when he deals with the Israel stories, or the other writers here, they call it World War III watch, because people are very scared that this will get into a larger conflict. And Vladimir Putin, he doesn't bluff, and that's the key here. And no one respects the U.S. No one respects Biden, and no one thinks Biden will really do anything if Russia decides to do more. Remember, Russia, was it a week ago? Putin put out feelers. Let's just call it a draw. Now let's do a peace treaty. Let's let us stay where make the borders where we're all at right now, and we won't have any more fighting. And the allies and Zelensky there wouldn't even hear of it, wouldn't even want to talk about that. So this looks like the perpetual war that Biden was talking about. Certainly Israel doesn't want a perpetual war in Gaza, but they don't want Gaza to be able to destroy them with Hamas as they've been attempting to do. So anyway, as we leave this week, as we have 2 days of very much weirdness here in the U.S. First of all, the verdict yesterday against Donald Trump, this kangaroo court, the sham verdict, basically showing that we're a banana republic now, that we've got no real law and order. Then today, the president of the United States comes out immediately when he knows Israel can't respond for 24 hours, says this is an Israeli proposal, not an American one, an Israeli one. And the Israeli proposal says, let's stop fighting right now. We'll do a ceasefire and we'll get the hostages back right away. And we'll move on from there and call it a day. In fact, what was interesting was just the day before with one of the leaders, in fact, it was Hanabi, the other person that we talked to earlier, talking about the war going on for 7 months, met with the hostages family. And he said specifically, we will not stop the war just for the sake of the hostages. We cannot do that. We have to achieve our goals. According to Joe Biden, the goal is surrender, surrender, surrender. So anyway, we'll have a ton more to say about that tomorrow. All it does is confirm what the Bible says. Like we mentioned today, the United States is not a player in last days Bible prophecy, not a superpower anymore. Israel will be alone in the world. Everybody will be against it. But the one person that'll be for it is God himself, and that's all you need. Like Paul said to the Romans, if God be for us, who can be against us? And as Martin Luther said, one with God is the majority. All right, I'm Don Stewart. Thanks for watching. We'll be back with you tomorrow. Until then, as always, may the Lord richly, richly bless.